Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is HarrisX founder and CEO, Dritan Nesho. Dritan, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Brittany.
I feel like the past few times, every time you and I have talked, it has been in the wake of unprecedented times, and that's where we are right now. President Joe Biden dropped out of the 2024 race, but before he did so, HarrisX Forbes had a poll about President Trump and his RNC speech, as well as head-to-head matchups. So let's dive into there. What did voters think about Trump's RNC speech?
So just to lay the scene a little bit, we were in field together with Forbes after Trump's RNC speech, and we pulled this survey of over 2,500 respondents that was running over the weekend, about an hour before President Biden's announcement was made. Nevertheless, we have been tracking head-to-head matchups with President Biden and Kamala Harris. So we have a rich view into the state of the race as it stands. First off, close to 8 in 10 voters watched Trump's RNC speech. Overall, voters were split whether or not the speech was unifying or divisive. And again, it was a long speech, and President Trump was less humble and a little bit less magnanimous than he was in the lead up to the speech post the assassination attempt. However, 56% had a favorable reception to it, which is positive for Trump. And it did the trick with Republican voters, which overwhelmingly supported the speech, as well as with independents. What we saw in the poll is that a net of about 11% of voters are more likely to vote for Trump after the speech than they were before. 33% said that they're more likely to vote for Trump, 22% said less likely, and for about 46%, a little bit less than half, said that it didn't make any impact. But when you dive deeper and you look at important segments of the electorate, with his base, with the GOP base, 61% said they were more likely to vote for Trump, and only 5% said less likely. When you look at independents, 28% said more likely, and 19% said less likely. Even 9% of Democrats, and we've talked about in the past that Trump has some cross-party pull with Democrats. He's not a conventional Republican candidate, let's put it that way. He resembles a lot more the Democrats of the 1980s, the economic populism that they had. So even 9% of Democrats said that they're more likely to vote for Trump, even though overwhelmingly 39% said less likely, and then 52% said it would have no impact. I think where President Trump did also well is with the pivotal battleground of suburban women. In our last poll together, we noted how a lot of the undecideds that we were seeing in the head-to-head matchup between Biden and Trump, how they over-indexed on being suburban women. And this is historically Democratic linchpin or voter group that now was undecided or has been undecided up until the race really changed yesterday. And 28% of suburban women said that they're more likely to vote for Trump. 21% said less likely. The rest said no impact. So there was a net positive effect there with suburban women as well. So all in all, he gets good marks for the speech. It was a speech with less rhetoric and less vitriol than Trump's historical speeches. And voters respond to that. Right? Voters, as we've said again before, they want clear positions for the future, clear positions of the issues that matter to them, and really a vision of what America looks like under either of these candidates, rather than continuing to relitigate over and over again past occurrences. So all in all, he gets good grades for his speech, and that seems to have translated for him in the horse race as well.
Let's talk about how that over 90-minute speech translated in the horse race, because we know that in a head-to-head matchup, former President Trump was beating Biden But then, as you noted yesterday, we saw President Biden drop out of the 2024 race. I know HarrisX Forbes has some numbers about a head-to-head matchup between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. Talk about the numbers here.
Absolutely. So the post-convention speech bump is real for both Trump and the Republicans. What we're seeing is that former President Trump has nearly doubled his lead, both towards President Biden and towards Kamala Harris. So yeah, right now, where the state of the horse race stands is that Trump is ahead by 8 points when you don't account for undecideds, when you run him against Biden. And then when you factor in for those undecideds and you ask them which way are you leaning, he's ahead by 6 points. This is roughly 2 times the gap or the margin that we had several days ago or a few days ago when we last spoke together and we were last tracking the state of the horse race. With Harris, we see similar numbers. Trump is ahead by 9 points compared to Harris when you don't factor in undecided voters. And when you push undecided voters, Harris does a little bit better with undecided voters than Biden did. So it's again Trump +6. So she cuts the margin when you factor in undecideds, but still starting behind and still needing to make up a good amount of ground compared to President Trump. The other thing that's concerning for the Democrats is that the gap grows amongst likely voters to a double-digit gap. When you look at likely voters, those who say that they are very likely to vote or significantly likely to vote in the upcoming election, the gap is +10 when you don't factor in undecideds. And then when you factor in undecideds, it narrows a little bit to +8. And these numbers are the same for both Biden and Kamala Harris. So the post-convention speech and post-convention bump for Trump is real. And at least as of an hour before President Biden's announcement, neither Harris nor Biden are doing particularly well. They're both starting behind the 8 ball when you match them up with Trump.
Trump got the RNC bump, as you said, but does this shakeup, this last-minute shakeup less than a month from the DNC, does that give Kamala Harris and Democrats a bump? Did this move energize the base? Because yesterday, Kamala Harris did see record-breaking fundraising numbers.
Yeah, I think that where the change matters is in terms of energizing the Democratic base and getting out the vote. And that's what you're seeing with the close to $50 million raised within less than 24 hours after the announcement. Does it make a difference for independent voters, for undecided voters, for the state of the horse race? That's something that we're going to look at closely over the course of this week. What we know so far is that Vice President Harris's numbers have tracked those of President Biden for months now. And she has performed similarly, if not slightly worse, than President Biden has. Both of their approvals are underwater, deeply underwater at 38%. It's exactly the same. However, Kamala does have higher approval amongst young Democrats, 18 to 34-year-old, 62% compared to Biden's 55%, and then slightly better approval amongst Hispanic Democrats, 68% to 62%. She also seems to win undecideds by a better margin than Biden, and we see good traction for her amongst undecided independents, 59% to 41% against Trump. So she wins undecided independents when you ask them which way will you break or lean. And very importantly, suburban women, which, as I mentioned, are a key battleground and a historically Democratic voter group. So amongst the undecideds, she does better, but again, she starts at a disadvantage compared to Trump, and uh, her numbers are similar to Biden. So it might be a little bit of a case of too similar and too late. That she's too similar to President Biden or is seen as owning many of the same issue positions as he has. She only has about 3 months worth of runway, which is not a lot of time to build her up. There's a question mark in terms of the momentum that she will get with the Democratic base, and our polling indicates clearly that her selection alleviates concerns amongst the Democratic base, and that the level of concern among for their candidate drops from the mid 30s to roughly the mid 20s between Biden and Kamala. But we will see how this polling matures and stabilizes over the next few days, and see whether or not Kamala can get real traction compared to Trump, or as I said, is it a case of too similar, too late?
So, as we know, President Biden's major problem, the thing that really made him leave the race, was his age and mental acuity. Voters did not feel good about that. Kamala Harris is 20 years younger than him, so she doesn't inherit that problem. But what you're saying is she inherits the problems of the administration, like the record on immigration and like
Right.
the economy. So she has that wrath around her. Republicans can say, hey, this is essentially Biden Jr.
Absolutely, and you notice that within minutes of the announcement, a pro-Trump super PAC had an attack ad out on Kamala Harris that underscored this specific point, and that said that she owns all of the policy decisions of the administration and some of the big failures, like immigration. You also have to bear in mind that in a previous poll that we conducted together about a month ago, we asked voters of their expectation. Did they think that Biden would be able to complete a second term? And if not, when did they expect Kamala Harris to step in and take over for Biden? A majority expected her to step in and take over for Biden within the first year of the second Biden administration. And then the numbers grew significantly from there on. So a lot of voters were also factoring in the fact that a vote for Biden was to a very large extent also a vote for Kamala Harris. And based on what I'm seeing right now, the fundamentals are stacked up at a disadvantage for her. We'll see whether or not this momentum after the announcement changes anything in a sustained basis or not. But based on the numbers that we have, it's too early to tell. And what we're seeing clearly is significant traction from Trump and the Republican, which is really also translating in the generic ballot and downrange. The GOP, in our poll, since the convention finished, has also doubled its lead in the generic ballot from +2 to now +5. This is a question that asks, who are you willing to vote for in the upcoming election for as your congressional representative? And this validates in a great degree why Biden decided to step aside, because he was not able to help the rank and file downrange. And in fact, you can make the argument that he was hurting many Democrats that are running um, in competitive downrange elections. So again, the picture as we're seeing it right now is that the post RNC bump is real. Kamala seems to have some momentum. Can she translate it into better polling numbers? Yet to be seen.
So, Democrats in those battleground states, I mean, they were valid for their concerns based on this poll that a Biden on top of the ticket would affect them in their congressional races and their Senate races.
Yes, essentially, left unchanged, the polling showed that Republicans had gained in the generic ballot. This number is much more difficult to move than the presidential horse race number because it reflects the opinions of voters across many different districts and jurisdictions on a very wide array of potential candidates. And the fact that the generic ballot number also doubled after the Republican National Convention tells you that the Republicans landed several messaging wins with the electorate at large during that convention that don't just have to do with President Trump, but they translate downrange to the Republican rank and file.
This was a monumental shakeup. As a pollster, does everything we know about the election right now, has that been blown up, or are there just a few unanswered questions? I mean, what are you looking out for?
Well, I think that we will have a clear picture within the next week. And candidates matter in an election setting, and how Vice President Harris approaches the next 2 to 3 weeks will determine, in large part, how competitive she is as a candidate and whether or not the messaging that she has to offer, the policies that she has to offer, translate for the electorate. We've spoken in the past that the voters in the middle, the voters that will decide this election, these are issue-based voters. These are voters that, by and large, don't like any of the choices that are put in front of them. They didn't want Trump to run again. They didn't want Biden to run again. Over 2/3 of voters on both sides of the equation. And they haven't been particularly impressed by Vice President Harris, whose numbers, as I mentioned, have slightly trailed those of President Biden's up to date. So a lot is to be seen how she introduces herself or reintroduces herself, and whether or not she can build a compelling choice for this election and a compelling vision of the future under a Harris administration. I think that there's a lot yet to be seen, but this polling gives us an indication of her starting point, and the fact that her starting point is behind Trump by a pretty hefty margin, at least as the horse race stood at noon yesterday.
Dritan, as you noted, there is a lot that remains to be seen, but as more numbers come out from you, I am so excited to break them down and continue the conversation. Dritan, Nesho, thank you so much.
See you soon. And everyone, check in with Forbes for our latest numbers as we go through this week.